Good afternoon.
Good evening, everyone.
We're gonna start, just give me 1 second. Okay, I just needed to try to improve my view for a bit. And I think we're in better shape. I need to take attendance. So let me do that at first. How is everyone doing? Did you have
Well,
a good
thank
week?
you.
Okay, good. I marked your exercise on uses of the comma, and I return feedback at about 4 today. Was there any issue joining this meeting?
Well, the only issue I had was waiting for the
Uh-huh.
host.
Which was
I
me.
guess I may have, okay, I waited, I logged in, I guess, pretty early.
What time did you log in?
Probably about 5:50.
Okay, all right, so you waited for about 10 minutes or more than 10
Mhm.
minutes?
Yeah, I dropped off
Okay, all
and
right.
then I came back in.
Okay, so there was no issue with the wrong meeting link or,
No, I
Any of
didn't have any.
okay, great. And you used the meeting link that I sent today?
Yes.
All right, great. So I want to apologize for the confusion that's happened up to this point. I received the information from a third party, and I don't want to say it's the person's fault. What I should have done when I got the link was logged into Zoom myself to verify that the numbers matched. But I didn't think that the numbers would be wrong. So, because I didn't set up the meeting. The person who set up the meeting sent the link to me and I didn't question it. And so it was my responsibility to verify the information and I sent it out. And I think when our first meeting was scheduled, we had one link and then additional classes was scheduled after that. And the link was used for those classes. And so students were being rerouted to a different class last time. I understand that this is happening in some other classes as well. A student asked me, it was Jules who asked whether I knew anything about a Saturday class. I'm sorry. I did send the message on to Miss Dean in the office. And I hope that whatever issues there are still with meeting links and students being sent to the wrong classes, I hope that they get resolved soon. But hopefully we don't have that issue anymore. Just use the link that I sent. I went into Zoom, like I said, and matched up the numbers and they correspond. And so you shouldn't have a trouble joining the meeting from here on out. Okay. I want you to listen as I call your name. I'll just say present. I think we have, let me see how many participants are in this meeting. 5. It's a little bit early to take attendance, but I'm gonna do it now. Sorry, Janice.
No, that was me. I think it should give them like at least 10-minute grace period because it was a while for some of us to get in.
I will, at the end of the meeting, take attendance again.
Okay.
I'll update it. Natasha, I've already pulled it up, so we may as well do this now. Natasha? Present. Bernique? Present. Tanishka?
Present.
Helga? No Helga yet. Mikhail Nabi? Edrika? Jules? Felicia Pratt?
Here.
Janice? Is it Janice or Janice?
Janice, present.
Janice? Denara Strawn? Helena Stirrup, and Denise Thompson. Okay. So I'll see if those students are in the meeting by the end of this lesson. Now, someone said that they had a difficult time joining the meeting. You said it took you a while to get in. Who was that?
I mean, that was me. I mean, I logged in 5:50, but like I say, I say probably the host wasn't there as yet. And then I also came back like 2 minutes to 6 and it said the same thing.
Right. I was in the meeting when
Uh-huh.
another meeting logged out of that meeting and then came here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's what happened. So
Okay.
I am on Zoom exploring and scrolling around. So that was my fault. Yeah,
Understood.
and then I joined your meeting.
Oh,
Okay. So I want to talk today about negative news and crisis communication. So we're going to be focusing on chapter 3 in your course text. And it's an important subject for us to cover because we all want to avoid the uncomfortable, whether we're talking about interpersonal communication, the uncomfortable conversation, or having to deliver bad news related to a company or some crisis that is developing. Most recently, the crisis has been COVID-19. I'm going to mute your microphones 1 second. I'm getting some feedback. Okay, and Helga joined. Helga, welcome. It's been a journey.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. So Helga's joining us for the first time. We had some issues with contact information, but she's here, so great. I sent you the syllabus and I don't think I sent you the last discussion prompt, but for now, at least you should have a copy of the syllabus and you and I can talk through any notes or assignments that you've missed. But most of it was through conversation last class, right?
Okay.
There's no way for me to really recover what came out of those conversations, but we could talk about what the class discussed.
Okay.
All right. And so as I said, today we're going to talk about negative news and crisis communication. 1 second while I pull up my plan. And this is from chapter 3 in your course text, which deals with the very same subject. As I said, we all try to avoid uncomfortable situations wherever possible. And I was saying before, I took that little digression, that recently the crisis has been COVID-19, and most press conferences have been related to providing news or updates about COVID-19, and that news has been met with mixed reviews. A lot of people criticize the former prime minister for his handling of press conferences, for the seemingly abrupt way that he dealt with reporters and delivered information to the Bahamian public. So we're going to look at delivering negative news in different formats, in letter format, at press conferences, and more public forms of address. We'll talk about some strategies that you need to keep in mind. All right. So as we go through, feel free to take any notes that you deem necessary, but a lot of what I'm saying is coming from chapter 3 in your course text. Okay. All right. So the first thing I want to share with you is the 7 strategies or 7 goals that you should keep in mind when you're sharing negative news. And I'm gonna go through the list, and then I'm gonna give you a visual of these rules. For those of you who may want to take a screenshot or ask questions. So the first one is you need to be clear, and this whole emphasis on clarity and conciseness should begin to seem familiar to you because we've been talking so much about it. In all forms of communication, you need to have a clear idea of what it is you want to communicate, and then a plan as to how you are going to get that message across in the most effective way. Having that plan in mind and being aware of the need for clarity and conciseness will help you to meet your communication objective. right? Especially in an uncomfortable situation. You're going to want to have a definite plan. The second goal is to help the receiver to understand and accept the news. And I'm going to repeat that because oftentimes in communication or communicating difficult or negative news, our emphasis is many times on how we feel, our apprehension in approaching the subject, that we often forget to focus on the audience or the receiver, how they may feel. And so a second goal is to keep the receiver in mind to help them to understand and accept the news. What skills do you think are most important in making that objective or that goal come to fruition? You need to help the receiver to understand and accept the news. What can you do to make that happen? Or what kind of attitude or mindset is necessary for that to happen?
Probably an empathetic mindset.
Excellent. Who said that? I'm out of Zoom, so I don't see who's answering me or responding to me. Who said that?
Tanishka.
Tanishka. You need an empathetic mindset. And to put it simply, to empathize with someone is to put yourself in their position. And so if it's difficult news, imagine that you have to issue a warning in writing to an employee, or even worse, advise someone that they've been terminated. You want to put yourself in the receiver's position, because if you're uncomfortable in delivering the news, they are even more uncomfortable in hearing it. And so that requires empathy. Tone is very important. When I say or talk about tone, what do you think I mean when I talk about a writer's tone?
Delivery.
Delivery, but delivery could also refer to style. For instance, am I writing a memo versus a report? Delivery might refer to whether it's oral versus written. Tone is a part of
Okay.
delivery, but it's a very specific part of your delivery.
Passive aggressive.
Sorry, passive aggressive?
Passive aggressive. Your
Passive ag-
tone can be.
Okay, you're saying your tone can be or should be passive aggressive?
Can be either one
Oh, it can be passive
right-
or aggressive?
in writing, right? If you're communicating something to somebody via email or via letter, and your can be either one that's passive but getting the message across, or it could be aggressive and doing the same thing.
Okay, all right. So I think you're talking about the direct versus indirect approach. And I prefer to frame it in that way instead of using the word aggressive, because aggressive in communication is almost always bad. And passive is not necessarily desired either. Passive suggests beating around the bush, not necessarily meeting the communication objective because you're afraid to approach this uncomfortable situation. But there is a direct and an indirect approach, which we're going to talk about later. So yes, you have two options in terms of how you want to deliver the message. But when I talk about tone, it may be more familiar to us when we think about tone of voice someone might use. It refers to the emotions you are able to detect by listening to my voice. So my voice, the tone, the inflections, where it goes up, where it comes down, should give you a clue about my attitude toward the subject. And sometimes the audience interprets it as an attitude toward them. And for that reason, tone is very, very important because you don't want your audience to misunderstand. When we discuss tone in writing, it kind of means the same thing, but we don't have the cues for the voice or facial expressions that also indicate attitude. It refers to the writer's attitude toward his or her subject. So your tone might be too angry. As Janice has said, it may be too aggressive. You want to aim for a softer, more conciliatory, calming tone, especially if the news is negative, and professional tone. And professional could also refer to style or delivery. But you want to be very, very careful about the attitude that your words reveal. And these are some of the nuances in language. the sort of fine points that you want to keep in mind. We know that word choice and diction are very important because we tend to think of it in a kind of linear way, in that I need to say X, and so I want to choose the appropriate words to communicate X. That we sometimes miss the subtext of our message, that some words have particular connotations that carry ideas and attitudes that we perhaps don't want to convey, right? And may send the wrong message in terms of our tone. And so it's very, very important that we choose the right words, not just to get the message across, but to get it across in the way we want it to be received as well, right? And the third goal is to maintain trust and respect. And that is twofold. We want to maintain the trust of our audience. We don't want to violate that trust. And we also want to maintain respect, both respect for them, for ourselves, and for the organization that we are communicating on behalf of. That is very important if we want to keep the lines of communication open, and if we want to prevent conveying negative news from turning into a disaster situation, right? Or handling it so poorly that we misrepresent ourselves and the organization that we work for. So that's the third goal. The next, and this is very important more and more today, maybe it's not a reality that we think about so much in the Bahamas, but it is a reality that we need to be aware of. We want to communicate negative news in such a way that we avoid legal ramifications. That means don't admit guilt, don't admit culpability, and that's going to be important, especially when we look at some kinds of oral communication as in press conferences and public addresses. But be aware, especially in writing. Someone has a question? Okay, I'm gonna mute your microphones. All right, and so I was saying that the fourth goal is to avoid any kind of legal liability, anything, especially if it's in writing, that may make this company face potential legal action, or that may expose us to liability, expose the organization to liability in any way. And the fifth goal is to maintain the relationship. Even if you are communicating negative news, as in an employee is being terminated, you want to communicate that news in such a way that the relationship is maintained. And that may seem strange because you're thinking ending employment with this individual is terminating the relationship. But there are some other considerations for us to keep in mind. Why or how can an individual impact your business or your professional reputation even after termination? How is that possible? All right, I'm gonna allow you. I need to go into, let me go into my settings to allow you to unmute yourself. Raise your hand for me if you'd like to answer. Let me see if I've given you the opportunity to unmute yourself. Helga. Okay, yes.
I'm thinking in today's world where technology is very prevalent, you have Facebook and other social media platforms. If an employee felt like they were unjustly terminated, they can post, they can blog, and they can go on these various platforms, mention the company name, and sometimes based on feelings and emotions, even over exaggerate the situation, and that can bring negative publicity to that company.
100%, absolutely. We live in an age dominated by social media. And so ending an employment relationship with an underperforming employee doesn't mean they cannot impact our business. And so we need to communicate in such a way that they feel respected. And so at the end of this communication, their aim is not to go off and either badmouth the company on social media or verbally to anyone who would listen, or to write negative reviews about this company in a way that could be damaging, right? And so thank you for that, Helga. That is absolutely something that we need to be very concerned about today, because people tend to vent. And one of the most damaging things to a business is when a dissatisfied customer or a dissatisfied employee decides to make this their dissatisfaction viral or take it to social media, especially if they've not given the company the opportunity to address the issue. All right. I remember having a bad experience with an airline and being advised. I was quite shocked. I was advised by an airline employee, and this is an international airline, not Bahamian. I was advised by the employee to report. It happened in this way. We were checking in downstairs. You know, you come to the desk and you greet the check-in agent who takes your bags, and then you go upstairs and you might meet another desk agent. These are the people that board you on your flight. And so we mentioned the experience we had when we got upstairs, and she said, we've gotten so many negative comments and complaints about that employee. If I were you, I would complain. And if nothing is done, then go to Twitter. And I found that so interesting and also negative, because here you have one employee encouraging a client or a customer to badmouth the organization in a very public setting, or to badmouth this employee in a very public setting. But in her estimation, she said, based on her experience, that's when the company responds. Nothing's done when you complain to management, but if you go to Twitter, then it becomes something more public and they respond and you even get compensation, right? So more and more businesses are concerned with how to manage their reputation on social media as well. And the next goal, and this is again tied to audience, more so than the actual message itself, you want to reduce the anxiety, or the deliverer of the message. You want to reduce the anxiety associated with the news. And we're going to look at strategies to do this. And the anxiety, of course, refers to the audience, the person receiving the message. You want to make them as comfortable as possible, and also yourself. You don't want to seem nervous, apprehensive, because that's going to transfer as well, especially in face-to-face communication. And the last goal is to achieve the outcome. Not shy away from the negative news, or call someone into the office to deliver bad news of termination or reduced work schedule, and then find at the end of your meeting that it was so difficult for you to deliver the news that you didn't actually do it at all, right? That's an example of failed communication. And so I'm going to share these 7 goals with you so that you get a view of what they look like. I don't know if you were able to take notes, but I'm going to share them on screen now, open. And then we're going to talk about a suggested model for delivering negative news. So what you're looking at are the 7 goals that I just reviewed. Do you think anything was left out in these goals? Or would you like to add something based on your own experience? Can you think of a situation where you believe that negative news was poorly disseminated or communicated, and it had an adverse impact? And you don't have to necessarily, if the company is connected to you in some way, you don't have to identify the company. If not, then feel free to do so. But can you think of an example other than the aforementioned COVID-19? And again, that's still debatable, right? It's a matter of opinion whether the press conferences are poorly handled. But can you think of a situation where negative news damaged the company's reputation or cost the company? Anyone?
I could try, but I think there was an incident happened with a particular bank. And I wouldn't say it was negative it was part negative news and I guess bad
This is recently
communication.
or several years ago?
You can say recently.
Okay.
Um, and the the bank was, I'm guessing, consolidating some of their locations, and word get out that the bank was leaving the country. So you had people came in, going into the bank,
Closing
closing
their
their
account.
account. You understand? So I think that's an example of bad news affecting a company because that bank then lost a lot of customers because of that.
And they should have gotten in front of the communication,
Right.
right? It's sometimes difficult to do in this age of social media because things get leaked so fast. And we don't always know where the truth lies. It's sometimes buried and we have to dig for it, but word spread so quickly and we're a very oral culture. Um, I will tell one person who will tell another person before we know it, the message is spread around the island. And then in transition or in translation, parts of the message have been changed. And so finding the truth becomes even more and more difficult. But yes, that's a good example. Anyone else? Anything else? I'm thinking about the way companies in the US have had to deal with publicity issues regarding Black Lives Matter, regarding race. Starbucks was involved in controversy. I subscribe to a newsletter that deals with race and critical race theory, racial issues and critical race theory. And I read an account recently of a family that had paid $100 to visit like an apple picking farm. I forget what state they were in, maybe Washington, I'm not sure. But they had paid $100 to go on an apple picking adventure for the day, basically. And the police were called because their daughter had picked up 6 apples, which they had not paid for. And the mother said that they were so far on the tour that she put the apples in the basket intending to pay for it. And management accused them of stealing 6 apples, and police were called. And so there is currently a boycott of this apple picking farm, and management is scrambling to try to deal with the fallout because they did not handle the crisis well. When questioned by news reporters about the incident, the employee did not say no comment or did not defer to management. The employee gave her version of events, which added more fuel to the fire. And so, all in all, they handled the situation poorly and now are dealing with the fallout because people are boycotting the business and the CEO is trying to scramble to save face. But we have so many examples like that. And more they become a concern as we have the internet, right? And things go viral. Renee, your mic is lit up. You have a question or comment?
Sorry?
I said your mic is lit up.
Oh, no. See, I live close to the airport, so you're hearing the planes fly over my house.
Oh, okay. All right, Renee. So it sounds like we're neighbors because I live close to the airport, too close to the airport.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Anyone else would like to add an experience or a comment? Okay, good. So remember I said that sometime in week 4, I'm gonna send you a review of all the notes. So this will be in the notes. I want us to look at a model, a suggested model for communicating bad news. And this is an assignment that you're gonna have to do in your group. So I'm gonna stop this share. And I want us to look at the 4 main parts of a negative news message. And imagine that this is a negative news message communicated in writing. There are some oral applications to this. We're going to talk about what they are. But let me open this so that I can share it with you. Okay. I'm trying to get back into, there we go. To mute the microphone. All right, good. So you're looking at 4 parts of a negative news message. And we have a buffer or cushion, the explanation for the message itself, why the negative news is necessary or why the problem arose, and then a kind of, or the negative news itself, and then a kind of redirect. Tell me what you understand. I know the answer is on the screen, but in your own words, I want you to tell me what you understand when you hear the word buffer or cushion. Can you think of an example of a buffer or cushion in a difficult situation? What might a buffer or a cushion sound like or look like?
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Basically, what I think, or what I gather when I hear cushion, even though you have bad news to deliver, you want to start off on a positive note. So you want to say how or what the positive aspect is, or the positive impact that whatever has had, or has occurred during the process. However, even though that is a positive, however, we still need this,
Mhm.
or we're still looking for that, or you still haven't been able to do this.
Okay, good.
So,
Excellent. Is that Denise?
yes, ma'am.
Yes. So a buffer or a cushion puts focus on the positive. And it's good to do that because when you're communicating negative news, it's easy to offend your audience, right? And so a buffer might begin, or a message that includes a buffer might begin with all the things. If you are reprimanding an employee, right? And this could be either verbally or in writing. The buffer might be an account of what the employee has done well, or a statement like, we value your service and we value your contribution to the organization. Saying things like that sets a positive tone, and that's important because the message is going to convey negative information, and the tone could be overwhelmingly negative if you don't take control of it. And so a buffer kind of lessens the blow and eases the impact of what you have to say. Now, with that being said, let's say your negative news message is 2 paragraphs long. The buffer can be a paragraph and a half, right? You do want to get to the actual negative news message and include an appropriate buffer, but you also don't want to beat around the bush, right? Or sing the employees' praises to the point where they wonder, well, what's the point of this message at all if I'm doing all of these things right, right? And so you want to set a careful balance, right? And then you of course need an explanation. Excuse me, I'm trying to mute the microphone. Tanishka, I keep muting you.
Okay, let me.
Are you unmuting because you have a question?
No, I don't know. I didn't do anything. I could mute it.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right, good. Okay, great. So then you have an explanation. So why is this problem existing? Or what is the nature of this issue? This is kind of tied to the negative news message itself. And this is perhaps the crux of your communication. And you have to be skillful about this. We're going to look at an example that did not go so well and talk about why, and then a redirect. And so you want to look at the negative news message as a kind of sandwich, right? You begin positive, the crux or the meat of the sandwich is the news itself, and then the bottom bun is the redirect, something positive. So you have sandwich between, you have this negative news sandwich between 2 positive bits of information, or 2 bits of information that set a positive tone. And so the redirect sets a positive tone, again, in that it points to a particular strategy or some way that this problem can be addressed, right? If it's some behavior that you want the employee to change, then perhaps suggestions or ways in which the employee can address the issue, or support that the company can offer in helping the employee to address this issue, right? But it's important to begin on a positive note and to end on a positive note, right? This is one way of delivering negative news. This is called the more indirect approach. The direct approach, and Janice was alluding to it earlier, the direct approach involves beginning with the negative news first. And that is somewhat abrupt, right? It is somewhat abrupt and may set the wrong tone and get the communication going in the wrong way. The direct, because it places the negative news at the beginning of the message, the employee may already be offended and may not listen to anything else that you want to say, right? And so the more indirect is preferred, even though that seems counterintuitive. Like, why in communication is it necessary ever to be indirect? Generally, only when you have negative news to communicate. And I don't want you to interpret indirect to mean beating around the bush or not getting to the message at all, but sort of couching the message in this positive tone, right? And buffering it with positive news as well. You don't want to attack the employee and potentially make the situation worse, right? Okay, good. Any questions or comments about anything that I've said so far? Any questions? All right. And so when we're communicating negative news, we have some options. We can do it in writing, or we can do it in person. So let's think for a minute about the advantages and disadvantages of each approach. So in person, communicating negative news in person. Let me create a scenario to make this a little bit more accessible. So let's go back to the example we used earlier, where you have to reprimand an employee. You have the option of communicating in person with that employee or putting it in writing. What are the advantages of in-person communication? What do you think are the advantages of in-person communication?
You have,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, you are able to have a one-on-one conversation. Maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding or miscommunication, or something happened that, that wasn't properly clarified somewhere along the line, got mixed up somewhere. So with having a conversation, you're able to clear up some things, you're able to uh, bring some point across and express yourself and understand where each other's coming from.
Okay, good. So that is a key advantage. It's more personal. You can get clarity or information about anything that was misunderstood, or learn the extenuating circumstances that explain the employee's bad behavior or the reason for the reprimand. Now, not necessarily saying that those extenuating circumstances are excusable, but if they exist, then they may bear consideration. If the employee actually has to deal with these extenuating circumstances, they bear consideration. All right. Good. Thank you, Denise. Anything else? Any other advantages to having this conversation in person rather than in writing? It gives the employee a chance not only to explain, but to do what? That will lead to even further dialogue. As you're talking, the employee has to,
If they're able to hear, listen to what the next person is saying, and understand better.
yes, and ask questions if they don't understand. And
Right.
that gives you the opportunity to provide more clarity and feedback, right? And so sometimes we may be reprimanding an employee, and he or she may not be as guilty as we think, right? Or there are other considerations that that need to be addressed. That person then has the opportunity to explain, offer feedback, and the feedback is immediate and so can be addressed immediately. But there are some disadvantages. What are some disadvantages to this in-person conversation?
More emotions coming in.
Definitely more emotions. And the problem with emotions is what? It creates a potential for
you not to be in a professional
Violence.
setting or
imagine a scene. Imagine an uncomfortable scene, tempers flaring, unprofessional conduct. And as we said last class, there is very little you can do after that to come back from that to save your reputation. And we'd like to think that when put in this situation, we always conduct ourselves in a particular way. We know what it means to be professional, and so we wouldn't dare put ourselves in a situation where we misrepresent our morals, our values, our level of professionalism. But the truth is, you never quite know what you will do until you're presented with the situation. And so one disadvantage of this in-person conversation is that it may lead to hot tempers and the communication may be totally ruined or go awry. Another disadvantage is if you're not well prepared for this in-person communication, if you're nervous, if you're apprehensive, and as the person delivering the negative news is also not going to go well. And what else you need to bring with you as the person delivering this message? What do you need to make sure you have above anything else? If you are going to reprimand this employee for supposed underperformance, what must you have?
All the necessary evidence or facts.
You need the information. You cannot,
File.
exactly. You need a file, you need a trail, you need a document. You need to make sure you have the complete story, the full story before you have this meeting. And so that requires preparation, right, as well. What about having it in writing? What about delivering negative news in writing? What are some of the advantages?
you don't have to face the person. You don't have to be to see their reaction.
And some, especially if you have more of an empathetic attitude, it could be more difficult for you, right? And so it is impersonal to an extent, and that can be good and bad, right? You don't have to face the person. In that instance, the computer screen provides a buffer or a kind of distance that may be quite necessary or helpful in communicating negative news. And because you don't have to face the person, the potential for an emotional outburst is also reduced. But there are also a lot of disadvantages to communicating bad news in writing. A lot of disadvantages. What are some of the disadvantages? As we're thinking about the best way to communicate our message, if we settle on putting it in writing, what are some of the disadvantages?
Miscommunication. The person
Miscommunication. Okay, we've written it down. The miscommunication comes, in the case of a written record, the miscommunication comes from what?
inaccurate information.
Misunderstanding.
Well, let's hope inaccurate information is not the case because you've prepared and you have all the facts and all the information well documented. It comes from misinterpretation. You say something and the receiver gets the wrong idea or the wrong impression. And this is why language and tone are so important. So the miscommunication comes more from misinterpretation and misunderstanding. And there is more room for misinterpretation. Whereas face to face, they don't understand or they misinterpret. They either try to defend themselves or ask a question and force you to clarify. In reading something, there is that immediacy is removed. And so essentially, it's left to the receiver to put their misunderstanding in writing and ask for clarity. And then you have that time delay. where bad feelings may fester, and the person may feel even more slighted for a longer period of time. What else do you need to before we move on? To avoid that, you need to be a really, really good communicator. To avoid any issues with miscommunication, you need to be a superior communicator, because the potential for harm in negative news is so great. Good. And so you want to keep those advantages and disadvantages in mind as you're thinking about the mode of communication. And then the situation must come to bear as well as you are deciding, do I put this in writing? Because always remember, writing means there's a record. And you have to think about whether you want there to be a paper trail, whether you need a paper trail, because putting it in writing creates that paper trail, okay? And exposes you to potential legal action as well, right? And so a lot of companies will get legal advice before they put policies or in writing or communicate negative news. They will get legal advice to protect themselves in situations like this. All right, good. So we talked a little bit about negative news and crisis communication. As I said, sometimes we have to communicate, or businesses communicate on a larger scale. A crisis or a negative event may require some kind of press release or press conference. So let's look at an example of crisis communication gone wrong. Now, this isn't the clearest video. Some parts of it, the language is clear. The visuals though, the picture is not so clear. So give me a second while I pull up this video, and we're gonna watch it, but hopefully it's not so bad that you can benefit from watching it. Okay, so just to give you some context and the kind of the backstory, this involves an incident where there was local water contaminated, and the residents near the water plant where there was this chemicals, near the plant where there was this chemical spill, have no access to water. And so here we have the CEO of the company who is responsible for the chemical spill trying to answer questions and deliver the negative news to reporters. So I want you to listen, and we'll talk about how this goes. So this is an example of communicating on a larger scale. I'm going to ask you to do an assignment where you communicate negative news in a more personal way, so interpersonal communication. But I want you to look at what goes wrong in this communication. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, so we have an image of Wolf Blitzer. Can everyone see this? It is blurry, like I said.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Right now, Freeman Industries, the company that supposedly
And can you hear? Can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So this is a 10-minute long video. We need to stop at about 8 minutes or so. After 8 minutes, Wolf Blitzer starts his commentary on this event, but listen as he tries to explain.
had this poisonous chemical thrown into the water supply there. They are speaking out now on what's going on. 300,000 people in West Virginia can't use water. Listen to this.
We worked through the night last night to remove all the material from our site. The material is no longer here. It's sitting at another remote location that we have. We've drained the storage tank that was in, that had the problem, and we have removed all of the material that is available and that can be vacuumed out of the ground. We brought in a large number of sucker trucks, which are like big vacuum cleaner trucks, that remove the material and took the material to another site for storage and amalgamation, ultimate cleanup. We have worked with the emergency services all day yesterday, all day today. Our intent is to be totally... Okay. Our intent is to be absolutely transparent, and we'll tell you what we know. And as much as we know to date is that we've had this release. Unfortunately, it appears that some of the material did get into the river and potentially or has impacted the water supply in Charleston. We have mitigated the risk, we believe, in terms of further material leaving this facility, and our mission now is to clean up. Thank you very much. Our mission now is to move to the next phase of remediation, which would be to take the dirt which is in the storage area and take that off-site for the appropriate disposal. We have worked with Coast Guard's department. We have booms that we're placing on the river just in case there's a potential for any further material to move, which will trap the material and stop the material from leaving the facility. We don't believe a great deal of material left the facility, and at this time we're not in a position to give you a number in terms of how much volume left. We simply don't know yet. We will know that in the next couple of days, and as more information becomes available, we will make it available to you guys.
How much is held in the tank, and how much is in the tank right now?
The tank is a 35,000-gallon storage tank, and we have taken...
Look here, sir.
Sorry. It's a 35...
Microphones, if you would, sir.
Even if the questions come from over here, we need to look at all the cameras.
Okay, all right. It's a 35,000-gallon storage tank. We've removed them. All of the material has been removed off-site. There is no more of that material on-site other than the material that went from the storage tank into the dike and some dirt that's around the affected area, which we're in the process of removing from the facility.
Did you remove that before or after the DEP order?
This has been an ongoing process. We started this yesterday. DEP's been here full time, and we've been working hand in hand with DEP since the beginning of this event.
So does that mean the maximum it could be 35,000 gallons?
No.
What is the maximum?
It's a 35,000-gallon storage tank. The maximum, we've taken several trucks of material out of that tank off this facility. We don't know what the volume is. As soon as we do know what the volume is, we will do a mass balance on what we collected. We know what was in the tank when we started, and we'll be able to tell you basically, what material was either taken with dirt or went out of the facility. We don't have that data yet.
How much leak?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're working on that right now, and we hope to have some answers on that question tomorrow. Look, guys, it has been an extremely long day. I'm having a hard trouble talking at the moment. I would appreciate it if we could wrap this thing up. I will...
We actually have a lot of questions. It's been a long day for a lot of people who don't have water. So can you give us an exact timeline as to how this all happened? The DEP was saying earlier today, as early as 8:15 yesterday morning, they were getting reports, and that you all did not call it in until 12 noon. The DEP was already here at 11:15. So what's the timeline on all this?
We were aware of the leaking storage tank around 10:30. We load tank trucks of this material on a regular basis, and occasionally we've had reports of an odor previously. So we were first aware of any material being spilled at 10:30 yesterday.
Could it have been earlier than yesterday? Because we've also received reports into our newsroom that it was as early as Wednesday, possibly Tuesday, people were starting to smell this in the area.
Well, we have no information on that.
Are there no systems in place to alert you of a leak at your facility other than a smell?
At this moment in time, I think that's all we have time for. So thanks for coming. Thanks, Peter.
We have more questions. Hey. No, we're not done.
You're not done.
We're not done.
Well, there is a spokes.
Anyone else have any other questions?
How did the whole
Hold on a second.
get in the bottom of the storage tank? How is the material able to get out of the storage tank at all?
Okay, so it's a steel storage tank. We don't know the answer to that. That's one of the things that we're trying to determine. There are a number of different theories, and quite frankly, it's pointless hypothesizing as to how it happened. It's a steel storage tank. It's been extremely cold. There are theories that maybe the cold change in temperature had something to do with it. We honestly don't know. Until we can get the metallurgy on the tank results back, we won't know that.
How often are the tank looked at to make sure that they're up to par?
They're looked at on a regular basis.
As in,
We have people at the tanks every day. Literally, we load trucks for this material every day.
is there any danger to the public?
I'm sorry?
Is there any danger to the public?
Not that we're aware of. I mean, there's a posted ban on the consumption of water. You know, we're not in the business of producing drinking water.
Yeah, but the chemical itself is dangerous to the public.
The chemical has a very, very low toxicity. So if you look at the technical data that's available on the product, it has no effect on aquatic life. So there is no danger to fish in the river. So as a chemical, the answer to that question we would have to say would be no.
Do you know, I mean, because it seems like there was a failure on two levels. There was a failure at the tank, and then there was a failure at the retainment wall. How often is that wall looked at? And then tell us about what procedures are in place at the plant, you know, to keep are there any alarms, alerts, anything like that?
We run this facility. This facility operates round the clock at this time of year. We always have employees on site. We do regular walk through the facility, and part of the process of loading the trucks we dispatch from here involve being at the storage tank. So there are not times when the tanks are left unattended for a long period of time.
At what point did you stop doing regular business?
He's got to get back in the plane.
After you discovered the leak, when did you stop doing regular business?
I can tell you that all our efforts have been focused since 10:30 yesterday morning on the remediation of this problem.
There was also some confusion in the beginning.
We'll get your questions answered. He's got to get back.
Minimum timeline for getting it cleaned up?
We will get back to you with an answer on that. We're working on that plan right now. Possible. We're working on that plan right now, sir.
Okay.
All right, so that's Gary Sutherland.
Sorry. Okay. So, how many of you were watching it initially and thinking, oh, it's not going so badly? What is Mr. talking about?
Me. When I heard him say, let's wrap it up, I was like, oh my God.
When you heard him say,
let's wrap it up.
yes. But okay, what is wrong with this communication? There's several things wrong. From the jump, he set himself up for failure. Someone was starting to say he's not empathetic. Who's that?
Natasha.
Natasha.
And he seems anxious.
He's very nervous.
Yes.
And anxious. He doesn't come across as empathetic. Instead of focusing on the 300,000 people impacted by this disaster,
he's worried about the aquatic life.
He's worried about the product, and he's saying, I have had a long day. It's been a long day for me. And the reporter, she sounds like one of the residents impacted by this, because she's there's a female reporter who is in his face, and she says, look, basically, no one cares about your long day. 300,000 people don't have water. They are having the real long day. But where did he go wrong from the very beginning? From the very beginning, this was a recipe for failure, because you could almost hear the kinds of technical questions they are asking him and the kinds of questions he's attempting to answer could later be used in some kind of suit against the company.
Yeah, he was not ready. He was not prepared. And he was not
ready.
Yeah.
He was not prepared. He should not have been the one speaking.
He's not the spokesman.
He don't have any information.
And so he should not have been. In this case, why would a CEO be addressing the media on this issue, the president of the company. This is when you send in your press officer. This is when you send in your public relations officer. This is when you send in someone trained to address the media, not you. Because this is a situation that could potentially, if you're already exposed to liability, you could be sued over this. And so when they ask questions like, when were you first aware of the leak? How often is this checked? How many staff members are manning this? You are being basically put in a position where you're asked to answer questions that could later end up in a court deposition.
Yeah.
And so you have to be very, very, so he should not have been the one giving this interview. And he's doing something that is glaringly wrong and could be considered insulting. What does he keep doing?
He keeps trying to walk up and he's not really engaged with the audience he's addressing.
Yeah, so he doesn't know where to look. He's trying to walk off, yes, but this is about a plant that had some chemical spill and the residents, 300,000 people don't have water and they don't know when water will be restored. And what does he keep doing? He's
Drinking from the bottle of water.
He's
Kept drinking his clean water.
Yes, and that is not a good look at all. It comes off as even more tone deaf. People don't have water, and here you are with your rich self on TV, president of this plant that caused this chemical spill, drinking from your bottled water, and people don't have water in their homes. It was bad, not only because of what he said, but because of body language and the kinds of nonverbal things he was doing that also impacted how his message was received. And so no, the press conference didn't go well, but he shouldn't have been the one addressing the media. Often I've asked in the last 5 years, before a new administration was elected on September 16th, I've often asked, who is the PM's press secretary? Who is the PM's public relations officer? Why does he keep addressing the media on these very difficult issues with little preparation? And the audience can be so unforgiving. I've asked that question a lot. And so in cases where you have to deliver difficult news, definitely it shouldn't come from the top. There should be people appointed or people trained to address these difficult situations. All right, good. So I wanted to share that with you. It is by no means comic, but it is a good indication of how communication can go wrong. Not just because of what we say, but because of all the other things happening around us. And we communicate with so much more than our words, and they impact how our message is received as well. All right, good. Now, did he do anything right? Did he do anything right?
It was hard to say if he was doing anything right.
They seem to want to give information at first, maybe too much information, but very little in that video went well. All right, so the next assignment that I want you to work on would be constructing negative news messages yourselves. And so there are 2 assignments that require you to draft negative news communication. So the first one says you are a supervisor, and this is an assignment from your course text. You are a supervisor and have been given the task of discussing repeated tardiness with an employee, Chris. Chris has frequently been late for work, and the problem has grown worse over the last 2 weeks. The tardiness is impairing not only Chris's performance, but also that of the entire work team. Your manager has instructed you to put an end to it. You decided to first speak with Chris about the problem and allow him time to improve. However, 1 week after discussion, you have seen no improvement in Chris's tardiness. Draft a letter to Chris in which you address this problem. The desired result is for Chris to stop his tardiness and improve his performance. So that's situation 1. Assignment 2, you are the manager for an events planning company which plans weddings, birthday parties, and other celebrations for your customers. 6 months ago, you were hired to coordinate a wedding for a bride and groom, which is scheduled to take place in 4 days. The flowers, wedding decor, cake, and entertainment have all been approved by the bride and groom, and final preparations have been made. However, yesterday you received an email from the banquet hall informing you of a flood at their facility, which prevents them from hosting the wedding this weekend. You have tried frantically to find an alternate venue, but with so little time to plan, your options are limited. The only acceptable option will cost the bride and groom an additional $500. Draft a letter to the bride and groom notifying them of this issue, of the options currently available to them, and of any measures your company is prepared to take to ensure that their wedding day is a success. Okay, good. So these are anyone in the group married? Anyone in the group married? Ever been married?
I am.
So the second is a kind of nightmare situation that I think would have to be the bride's worst nightmare, other than a bad husband, right? Imagine you have your big day planned and 4 days out you hear that this is going to be, there has to be some changes. All right, and so I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. Let me see how many participants we have now. I need to update the attendance roster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're gonna do 2 groups, one with 5, one with 4. And I want you to discuss the communication. Now I know that the second one says you're drafting an email to the bride, when a telephone conversation may be better, but I specifically chose email because I want us to work on drafting letters. And dealing with communication in a written form, right? And so I want you to discuss these 2 scenarios amongst yourselves and draft communications that best convey the negative news, but in a way that prevents misunderstanding, in a way that prevents tempers flaring, in a way that preserves the relationship. Right? And so this is a group assignment. I'm in no way expecting you to work on this individually. And I'm interested to hear what you come up with after you've had your small breakout room discussion. Okay, first though, I want us to look at basic business letter format. Let me pull this up. This is something that I expect is familiar to most of you. I'm sharing it as a kind of reinforcement. Okay, so just basic business letter format. Modified block or block, we're using block. Modified block is widely used. I think block format is more widely used. And so you're looking at, or should be looking at, I hope you can see my screen, a format for a business letter that uses block format. And so we have company letterhead. Under this, we have company information, but make a note, you would only include this if there is no letterhead. So if you are using letterhead, then all of this at the top would be cut out and you'd begin with the date. Because the assumption is this information, I'm talking about this information here. Okay, it's not allowing me to highlight my PDF. Name of company, address, that would be included in the letterhead, so it would be redundant to include it afterward. Then you have date, and you have the inside address. Your recipient is always someone very specific in the firm to which you are writing. If you don't know the person, let's say you are writing some letter of application, then it is your job to research and find out who the HR manager is, who that person is, who should be receiving this letter from you. You don't want to use generic dear sir, madam, or very broad addresses like that, right? So the representative's name would be the same as the inside address. The degree of formality will depend on your relationship with the person. No first name, not in business communication, not unless you're used to calling the person by their first name. If you have that relationship with them, and that's fine. And then you have your content, right? if in negative news, I want you to apply the more indirect where you have buffer, and then the negative news, and then a kind of redirect or solution at the end. So I want you to adapt the body of your letter to follow the negative news format we talked about earlier. And then you have your complimentary closing. You leave the 4 lines for your signature, and then you have your name and your personal information, right? So this is block. For modified block, you would basically follow the same format, except for the date and the closing. You would include them at the center point in the letter, right? Everything would be left justified and single space, except for the date and the closing. And so you may have seen letters using modified block. It is widely used, as I said. Now, if this were an essay or something communicated outside of business, you would see paragraphs indented, right? But block format requires you to begin everything at the left margin, right? Justify, left, justify everything on screen. I'm going to share this with you as well, just so that you have something to refer to. But, and I don't want to make the assumption and be wrong, but as people working in various banks, I assume that you write different forms of business communication quite often. And so you've seen the information on the screen, and this is not unfamiliar to you. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. I just wanted to provide that because I know we had one student who said that they are not working right now. And so this is for your benefit. It's always good to have a refresher. And I want you to apply this format to the kind of communication you will produce in this class. All right. Okay. So I'm going to email you the assignment, the 2 scenarios that you're drafting communication for. And so once you get into your breakout rooms, you can check your emails and you should see that assignment from me. Do you have any questions before I put you into your rooms? I'm going to give you about 35, 40 minutes to work because you have 2. I'm assuming you need more time, and you are going to need to share ideas amongst yourselves. And then I'd be eager to hear what you come up with in your discussion. So I'm going to be asking people to share their drafts, and we'll see what we can learn from this exchange. Okay, so if you have any questions, now's the time to ask me before I put you into your breakout rooms. Those of you who are new, this is your first class. The breakout room is a way of doing group activities. You will get an invitation to join either room 1 or 2. Once you are moved into the breakout room, you will get, as I said, between 35 and 40 minutes. It's 7:16 now. Between 35 and 40 minutes to complete this assignment. And 1 minute before the room ends, you'll get a warning from me saying your breakout room will close, and you will automatically be moved back into the main meeting. So this is an opportunity for you to dialogue with your classmates as well, and to hear another voice but mine for the next 30, 35 minutes or so. All right, so let me create the breakout rooms. Before I do that though, I see Denise came in. Who else was not here when I took the attendance? I'm gonna update the attendance list. Helga came in, Jules came in. Who else was not here? Edrika, and just the 4 of you? Okay, yes, because they're 9. All right. So Bernice, Denise, Edrika, Jules, Natasha, you're assigned to room 1. Helga, Janice, Felicia, and Tanishka, you are assigned to room 2. I'm going to open the rooms now, and you should see an invitation to join the breakout room. You'll still technically be in the meeting, just in a smaller meeting.
You're gonna have to take this one.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'll do my best.
Yes, you have the buffer, right?
Yes, I have the buffer.
We can't hear you, Shaniqua.
Sorry, I said we're back from breakout rooms. It sounds like the discussion was good. Did you have time to finish?
No,
No.
I
No,
gave you extra time.
we didn't.
No, you didn't. So how far did you get?
Well, we did the first one. We will have to wing the second one, and Helga will wing that with our assistance.
Okay, we can talk about the first. Let's talk about the first one tonight, and
Okay.
let's see how that goes. What about the second room? Were you able to finish both of them?
We
No,
finished the
You in the
second
second
one,
room,
not the first
Janice?
one. I'm in the second room.
Okay, so were those students in the first room able to finish both?
no.
No, we
did
finished
No,
the
we
second
finished the
one,
second one.
but not the first.
Oh,
All right,
wow.
so you tackled the wedding communication first. All right, so I'm eager to hear what you came up with. Well, that means that we can discuss both then, since we have an attempt at each. So who wants to draft the first one? That would be Janice's group. So let me hear your draft for number one.
Okay.
Mhm.
We appreciate your contribution to your team. However, we refer to the employee's handbook, which reference work hours, which is 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily, Monday to Friday. During the past 2 weeks, we've noticed that you would have reported to work at 10 a.m. and as a result, this has negatively impacted your team's productivity. Therefore, you are being issued a written warning. Failure to comply to the policy will result in further disciplinary action, which can lead to termination. To assist with your time management, you will be required to complete a daily sign-in sheet. We anticipate by implementing this measure, it will positively impact your productivity and that of your team.
Okay, good. So who was that? Who was answering just now?
Tanishka for
Tanishka for group two.
Yes.
Okay, so you said we appreciate your contribution to the team. So you began with that kind of buffer. Let's talk about what was good about group two, sorry, response, their approach to the late employee. What was good? Were you listening?
I think what was good was putting the employee at ease at the beginning of the email.
Okay, using the buffer.
Yeah, the
Yes.
positive tone, letting them
Okay,
know
good.
that, I mean, they appreciate them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Also, we implemented coaching measures. We did not just brush it off like saying get terminated right away. There
Right.
was sanctions to the tardiness, you know?
Yes. And it was also good that you were able to bring in the handbook so that the employee is able to see where there was some breach, right? And that there is a well-established record of employee conduct that he or she should be following. Good. Now, in terms of the buffer, I would even add more to it or develop it, be more specific than we appreciate your contribution to the team. So what can we specifically say in a case like that? What has the employee done well? And we want to be as exact as possible. Saying we appreciate your contribution may be too broad in this instance. So think about specific things. We appreciate your contribution and note that you have been able to achieve something,
Yeah.
right? Or that your positive attitude is, or you were able to work late during these particular times, or you met this sales target for the last 6 months, and so you are a valuable member of staff. But be specific when you are when you include that buffer and you're talking about the positives that the employee has done, why do you need to be specific?
You don't want to discourage them?
You don't want to discourage them, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes, and also because you are going to be very specific in your negative message.
Yes.
So
okay.
if you're gonna point out exactly what they're doing wrong, point out exactly what they're doing right. And that's not the time to be vague, because then it sounds like I just want you to, I threw this in there so that you don't get offended, but be very specific. You don't want it to seem tossed in. Good. And like I said, bring in the handbook, definitely. You and maybe not as formulaic as you are in violation of employee code 1.6. No, not as formulaic as that, but you do want that record to show where the employee is in breach. Now, in terms of the coaching, yes, you do want to indicate how the employee could be coached. Is there anything else we could suggest from a time management perspective, or from the standpoint of trying to help the employee get to work on time? And I didn't say this, right? That's something that's difficult to coach. That's something that's very difficult, because then you're thinking about home situation and traffic. And you might say something like that. While we understand that there are sometimes extenuating circumstances that prevent you from getting to work on time, 10 o'clock is egregious. If you're expected to be at work at 9 a.m. and you come sauntering in at 10, that is an egregious violation. And so even if you're not able to coach in that way, or to say, we think you should take these steps to get to work on time, because you really don't know what happens before the employee comes to work, acknowledge that there are some mitigating circumstances. Nonetheless, be reminded you're expected to be to work at 9 a.m. Definitely not 10. Right?
I think if this was a face-to-face conversation, I think it would have been easier for someone to address what's happening in terms of whether or not you have transportation,
Right.
if the bus runs in your area. And then it's at that time you can probably give them some coaching, some advice,
Right.
particularly if they're catching the bus. You
Right.
may want to leave out at 8 o'clock because of the area that you now live in, those type of things.
Right.
If you were doing a face-to-face,
If you were doing a face-to-face,
conversation.
why wasn't
Right.
this face-to-face?
Because there was a face-to-face already?
There was a face-to-face already. So what's happening now
Oh,
is this is being documented.
Yeah.
You know what comes next. There was a face-to-face already and nothing improved. So you might want to mention that in your letter as well, because you're documenting.
Yeah.
We've had a meeting and given you an opportunity to address the issue. It has not been addressed, and therefore we are notifying you in writing. Now, notifying in writing is never good. It's never good. Yeah, so yes, the paper trail. So there was a face-to-face, and so let's assume you gave that coaching in face-to-face. But I like the tone of that letter and the awareness that you need to provide some remedy if possible. But like I said, there may not always be, the possibility. You might otherwise say something like, we understand that, there are extenuating circumstances. And I think in the Bahamas, we like to say we live on Bahamian time. And that's cultural with us. We take that wherever we go. But especially in the work environment, it's a no, it's frowned upon. And 10 o'clock is excessively late. That's not even something that can be overlooked. You are 1 hour late. That's disrespectful at this point. And it comes down to robbing the company of time, right? And setting a bad example for other employees. Good. All right. Do we want to add anything else to Janice's and Tanishka Group 2's communication?
We might have started with the starting date of employment or something like that. Like, okay, since joining our team and so and so, you were a diligent worker, but as of late, so and so, such and such and such.
Since joining our team.
Yeah.
And so you're saying, as a part of the buffer, you say
buffer,
since you
right.
joined our
Good.
team in May 2018, you have been able to do these things successfully.
Right.
Okay, good. Yeah, but nothing as broad as, you know, we
We
appreciate your
yeah.
contribution to the team.
Can add more definition.
Yeah, something more definite, so that the employee will know that yes, you are acknowledging, because it's never all bad, right?
No.
And we want to be specific in both the criticism and in the positive reinforcement, right? Or the praise. Okay, good. Generally, in a situation like this, we would have had maybe one or more face-to-face conversations before we gotten to the point of the letter. So we had to assume that when this letter came about, the situation had gotten so bad that it had to be now documented. Okay, so what about number 2? The
Okay,
wedding.
so our team did a letter. We prepared a letter to the bride, to the bride and groom to be, advising them. And this is how the letter goes. The name of the team is Wedding Catcher Events. This is the letterhead: Wedding Catcher Events, Dream Catcher Events, Cable Beach, Nassau, Bahamas. Telephone 1-234-567. And it is addressed to Shelley Thompson, 1234 West Bay Street, Nassau, Bahamas. And it reads as follows: Dear Miss Thompson, thank you for choosing Dreamcatcher for bringing your dream wedding to a reality. It has been a pleasure sharing and exchanging ideas with you to make your special day one to remember. Unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond our control, we regrettably inform you that the venue of choice is no longer available. Due to flooding, which caused damages to the interior, the host is unable to facilitate your wedding, as repairs will not be able to be completed in 4 days' time. We have scoured far and wide to find a venue suitable to hold this momentous occasion. However, this location will cost an additional $500. We realize that this is very short notice and unplanned for. A decision needs to be made as soon as possible in order to secure the new location. Once again, we apologize for this minor setback. However, we are committed to making your special day one that you will never forget. Respectfully yours, Denise McPhee and team, wedding coordinator.
Okay, all right, good. So the disaster situation, the wedding has to be removed, and the location has to be moved. What is good about the letter we just heard from Denise? Thank you, Denise. What is good about that letter?
The letter was very informative.
Do you think the tone was appropriate?
Yes.
And they sound genuinely contrite and eager to make the situation right.
Yeah.
Is it Dreamcatcher's fault?
No.
It's not. It's not their fault. This is a circumstance that they cannot control. Yes, so the letter is informative. Is there anything else that we would like to say is good about it? The tone is good. And it comes across as though this team is eager to resolve the situation, and they understand how important this event is and are trying to mitigate any other issues, right, that may come up. Anything else? Anything else we'd like to say is good? Some information is missing from the letter, as informative as it is. What's missing? Read your paragraph again where you talk about the new venue, please, Denise.
Oh, I see what's missing. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I see it now.
Okay,
So what's missing?
Where and where?
Where? So what venue is gonna cost us $500 more?
Where?
Because there are some places that the bride might hear of and say, absolutely not.
Right.
Or some places, especially in the Bahamas, where we know, right? We basically know where the wedding venues are. At some places she might hear and say, oh, okay, I'd pay $500 more for that, right? So the venue, we've identified X location, the booking is available on your date, and it will cost $500 more. All right, anything else missing from the letter? There is something else missing. You should probably try to agree or set up a time to view the location and the venue with the bride, right? We wait to hear from you, and are open to doing a tour of the facility to see if it will meet your needs. Now, let me ask a hard question. Is this bride entitled and groom entitled to any kind of compensation? And if so, from whom?
Yeah.
From the original host.
You think so?
Well, even if it's
No.
not 100%, even if it's not 100%, they are entitled to some kind of compensation. Now, I get that. Okay, you make deposits are non-refundable, but it's not the bride's fault either that y'all had a flooding.
Right. No, when I say no, I mean the fact that you're going to get your money back, and that's also missing from the letter. The fact that you're going to get your money back is a given. Like there's no way you lose your deposit or any money put down for this flooded location. No, they're going to give you your money back. So when the letter says $500 additional, it means in addition to what you paid for venue one. On top of that, on top of a refund, are they entitled to any money back? No.
I don't think so.
Which is sad, right? You get no money back, the stress of it all. But really, this is an unforeseen event. And as much as we want to say the first company is liable, and if this was the US, we'd probably be talking about who's suing whom. There really is nothing that could be done to say make a case apart from the inconvenience, right? That the bride, and then they have to come up with $500 additional. Could or can Dreamcatcher do anything to make this even easier for the bride and groom?
Yeah.
They could waive it.
Pay the $500?
No.
They can. No way.
They
can if they want to.
Why not? Which company? It's not their fault either. So imagine they're taking on a $500 cost that has nothing to do with them, really.
Wouldn't that be good publicity?
No.
What about the publicity? But even if you want to badmouth someone in a case like this, who will you badmouth?
I said if that would be good publicity for the company.
Oh, giving them $500 back?
Waiving
That
it.
would be excellent publicity. That would be angelic stuff. Give them a halo. No, I don't think that any company in this case is liable, not the wedding planners and not the hotel. Now, maybe we could argue the hotel should have found someplace else. Maybe hotels have gardens.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Outdoor facilities where they can move the reception, the wedding. But again, that depends on weather. So the hotel should have been, or the first wedding venue should have been more able to accommodate the bride and the groom, rather than saying we had a flood, we can't do it. Sorry, we'll give you your money back, especially with 4 days to go, right? And if we think of our experience of hotels here, there are large grounds, beautiful gardens. There are other places this could have, even if they're concerned about weather, then you erect a tent in the garden to try to accommodate the guests. And so if the fault is anywhere in this, it's in the hotel who did not go the extra mile in trying to make the day go off without a hitch. But I think the communication is professional, and it shows an attention to detail and attention to the needs of the customer. Can you imagine this frustrating situation? You have no wedding, and no wedding venue, and no time to plan. I had an experience, a friend of mine is a designer and found himself in a situation where he was making clothing for the bridal party, and the clothes is not ready in time. So the bride's dress, the bridesmaids' dresses were not ready. And he had a few days before the wedding, but the bride was irate. After having come to his shop on more than one occasion and still finding that the attire was not ready, she took everything from him and demanded her money back. And that turned into such a prolonged and nasty exchange on social media with people chiming in, and it almost ruined his professional reputation. And the fallout from it was not good. And so you want to, as much as possible, avoid situations like this, because as we said at the very beginning of the class, more and more managing business reputations is about managing your reputation in the business itself through employees and their conduct on social media, and the kinds of things that you, sorry, mute your microphone, and the kinds of negative messages that might be spread about you, right? And so I don't know if he's fully recovered his reputation yet from that incident, but the bride, and to his unfortunate luck, the bride had a bridal party of, I want to say 10 girls. And so imagine 11 people on social media just taking your reputation to town. And so it was quite an ugly scene, but these things happen and you have to manage, right, the crisis as best as possible. All right, good. So any questions or comments? Now, Helga had said that, or group 2 said that Helga was going to ad lib the wedding communication. Do you have anything to add to that, Helga?
Well, basically we had almost the same thing, except in our letter that we were drafting, we did have where we mentioned to the bride that we did found several locations that we would like to schedule a meeting with her to go over the locations. But for our resolution, we did suggest waiving the that we would cover the $500 fee. Yeah.
Wow, that's generous. Why do you want to avoid doing things like that in business? Why do you want to avoid doing things like that in business?
I think because other people would, because something could happen at any time and persons might expect you to do the same thing to them.
That
do
is
the same thing for them.
That is a big responsibility that you are taking in a situation that really is not your fault as the wedding planner. You're taking on $500. And while you may empathize and feel for the person, you also have to think about your business's continuity and your bottom line. To take on a $500 bill is a big, and it would be, at this point, a loss. When maybe, you think of gains in terms of reputation and in terms of the positive light it would shed on your business. But can you afford to do something like that? Right? Is a consideration. So while that is good and admirable, you want to stay away from things like, don't assume liability or responsibility for something that is not your fault. And that's one of the key objectives. Remember, in communicating crisis news, that's one of the key things when we looked at those 7 goals. One of the key things we said was, don't assume liability, don't assume responsibility, especially if it's not your fault. So no, don't just say, here, take this $500. That's a big responsibility to take on. All right, anything else? All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I think we had a good discussion. We learned, hopefully, how to navigate. Now, next class, you are actually going to have to write individual bad news communication letters, and you will receive a grade for that, right? So this was preparation for your first graded assignment next week, which will be October 6th, I think is the date, right before the holiday. Do you have any questions for me? last class, let me pause before I move on. Do you have any questions for me? All right, now last class, I had divided students into groups for an assignment that you will see on your syllabus. So Helga, raise your hand, please, if this is your first class session. I know it's
Yeah, I don't
Helga's.
mind.
Oh, and also raise your hand if you weren't here last week.
Oh, I was here.
When we did this division. I want you, those students who were not here last week or to whom this sounds strange, you have a video presentation near the end of the semester and you're going to be paired for that presentation. So I want you to look over the requirements for the video presentation at the end of your syllabus. And next week, I'm going to put you into groups to work on now. Some of the groups have already been decided and assignments disseminated, right? But we're going to get to it next week where I put you into those students who weren't here when we did this exercise last week. I'm going to put you into groups. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't have any questions for me, we can end the meeting. I will see you on, let's get the exact date. Now, there should be no more confusion about this meeting date, October 6th, about the meeting link or getting into the meeting. We dealt with that and everything should be smooth sailing. So use the same link that you used today is the one that you will use until December 15th. All right?
Okay.
Good. So you're not going to get an email from me anymore before the lesson with meeting link now that we've worked that out. All right. Have a good evening. I will see you on
Okay.
October 6th.
Good evening.
Thank you, Miss
Good
Higgs.
evening,
Good
everyone.
evening.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.